Welcome, everyone, to week 3 of the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Series. My name is Dr. Jane Indorf, and I'm the Assistant Director of Undergraduate and Graduate Programs with the Leadership Alliance. I'm thrilled to be serving as your moderator for today's conversation with a doctoral scholar. The Virtual Professional Development Series, created by the Leadership Alliance Executive Office and our valued partners, serves to strengthen students' professional skills, foster meaningful connections, and expand exposure to graduate education and research opportunities for students across the country. The enthusiasm for this initiative has been extraordinary. We're proud to share that we now have almost 700 students registered to participate in the summer series, reflecting a strong commitment to professional growth, academic excellence, and research leadership. Through this workshop series, we hope to engage you in timely and thought-provoking conversations, expose you to critical issues shaping academia and research, and create opportunities to network with peers, mentors, and our exceptional Leadership Alliance doctoral scholars. Most importantly, we aim to equip you with practical strategies, insights, and skills to successfully navigate your academic and research journeys. And for those of you who are now joining us live, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We really love to know who's on the call with us. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Leadership Alliance doctoral scholar, Dr. Ferentz Lafargue. Dr. Lafargue is an Associate Dean of Students in Yale College and Director of the Mellon and Edward A. Bouchet undergraduate fellowship programs at Yale University. He is a graduate of Queens College, CUNY, where he earned a BA in English and Africana Studies. During the summer of his junior year at Queens, Ferentz participated in the Leadership Alliance SR-EIP at New York University. He later earned his Ph.D. in African American and American Studies at Yale, where he's also currently a lecturer in the Black Studies Department. At Yale and previously at Eugene Lang College and the Catholic University of America, he has taught courses on 19th, 20th, and 21st century African American and Caribbean literature and culture. Most of his professional work currently centers on student development and support and access and engagement initiatives. Ferentz is the author of the memoir Songs in the Key of My Life, and his writing has appeared in such venues as the Huffington Post, Next American City, America's Quarterly, and Social Texts. Welcome, Dr. Lafargue. We're so honored to have you here with us today. All right, so to get us started, could you please tell us a little more about yourself, about your academic journey, and also I'm particularly interested in what you're currently doing as an Associate Dean of Students and what that position looks like, but let's start with your background.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this afternoon, and thank you for all the scholars for joining us. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I remember what it was like to be in your shoes, and so it really is always an honor, a privilege, and to pay it forward. So to give you a sense, I'll do both a bit of biography, personal biography, and also professional biography, to get us going. I was born in Haiti, immigrated to the US, grew up in Jamaica, Queens. And so I used to tell people that attending Yale as a graduate student was the first time that I ever attended an educational institution that I couldn't walk to from my parents' apartment, or at least not a very long walk. I really enjoyed my time at Queens College, the part of the City University of New York public university system. I had a great series of mentors, I think which would be a recurring theme here. I was in what is called the SEEK program, which is very similar to those who may be in programs like McNair, TRIO, or Upward Bound at other universities. And so it was, SEEK was designed for students who are from low income, first gen, underrepresented backgrounds. and as a way to really provide a supplemental support or sort of acculturation to the college experience. So I did a pre-frosh orientation program, so where I got a chance to spend about 4 weeks on campus to get a sense of sort of what college classwork coursework was like. And then in my first year, I really got a chance to take a literature course, basically what was equivalent to English 101, your first year literature seminar, where I was fortunate to have an instructor, June Bob. And so Dr. Bob would go on to serve as my recommender for the Mellon, what was then the Mellon Minority Undergraduate Fellowship, the Mel Mays Fellowship that is known to you all now. And that really set in motion a really deep mentoring relationship. So I would spend, pretty much every day after class, for years, whether I was in her class or not, would go to her office hours. I would grow to become her research assistant. So, one of her first books, I helped write the index. Sorry, I helped sort of graph the index, do a lot of the footnotes. So I got a chance to see research up front. So I think which is will be another theme, some things that are important, looking out for opportunities to see what research looks like on the front lines. So I got a chance to see really beginning with my first semester of my sophomore year, how a scholar puts a book together. And because I was in constant conversation with Dr. Bob, it was, she would recommend other classes, professors, put me in touch with other professors on campus. So while she was my primary mentor, through that relationship, I was getting a chance to meet and acclimate myself to other faculty members throughout the university. So, I got a chance to take classes with Jeffrey Allen, Francois Pierre-Louis, all of these instructors who at Queens College were either in Africana studies or literature, and who, because of the introduction by Dr. Bob, were also joining in as part of like the team that took a mentoring and advisory interest in me. So my conversations with them were, replicated a lot of the kinds of conversations I was having with Dr. Bob in the sense that we would talk about coursework in office hours, but we were also spending a lot of time talking about graduate school, what it takes to become a professor, what does it take to complete a PhD, the different types of PhD programs that I might want to apply to. Should I do something that is more ethnic studies? Should I stay more squarely focused in literature? Should I pursue an interdisciplinary program like American Studies or African American Studies? So these were questions that were coming up, and in many ways, they weren't always initiated by me. So having a person do that initial outreach to say, "Hey, this is a student who is interested in doing a PhD. This is a student who's really interested in this broad area," gave these other professors some questions or prompts, as it were, to maybe ask me things that I might not have been thinking about. Now, to be honest, the way that I initially landed in terms of like Caribbean literature as a central focus, part of it was my own background as, as a person from Haiti and the Caribbean myself. But I also thought what would have been the greatest way to serve my professional life was to do research in the Caribbean. I was like, hey, if I'm going to do this thing, why not try to set up my life in a way where I could be spending my summers or sabbaticals working in the Caribbean? And that was like initially like, this is it. But there were other things that were also, I was very passionate about. I was a writer and editor for our college newspaper. I was really passionate about nonfiction writing and the possibility of being a journalist. So there was always that push and pull, right? So while I knew graduate school was there and the PhD was an attractive option, there was always this itch about sort of nonfiction writing that I always felt compelled to scratch. And over time, the two things would kind of balance each other out and work in tandem. And so by the time that I was entering graduate school or sort of becoming I should say, by the time that I was approaching my senior year, my research interests branched out a lot more than I anticipated. So I wasn't maybe as focused as being on like a Francophonist Caribbeanist, but I definitely was interested in sort of the work and the kind of the cultural history of the Americas. And it was a blessing to land in an interdisciplinary program like African American Studies at Yale, where where it was required to take classes in the social sciences. So I learned social science methodology. I learned about historical writing methodology, and as well as continuing to build on my interest in literature. So the kind of put this all in motion, what was intentional was sort of trying to be a good student, and taking on, sort of the kind of early lessons that I learned in that pre-Frosh program. Go to your professor's office hours. What ended up being a lot of times accidental and sort of kismet was actually finding a professor that ended up being a match, and who really sort of stepped up to meet me where I was in terms of research interest, helping me cultivate and kind of push me to excel. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what really stands out to me is the incredible support you had as an undergrad. Having those faculty mentors seemed to be very pivotal in boosting you along your career pathway. Um, okay, so we got so many questions for you, and we don't have time for them all. But let's jump in a little more to into some of the questions that were submitted about your summer research experience with Leadership Alliance. How would you describe your experience in the summer research early identification program, or what was it like participating in the Leadership Alliance program at NYU?
It was bar none one of the best experiences I ever had in my life. Part of the reason that I always want to come back and do these is because the experience was so transformative and just pivotal in so many ways. I'll start with some of the personal aspects of this.
Yeah.
I have friends from that Alliance experience that date back, to it was 1996, sorry, 1997, 1997. I'm thinking of the 30 years. So I still have friends and people who I'm very close in touch. My eldest daughter's godfather, I met in that Alliance program. I'm the godfather of his eldest son. So these are, friends and kind of folks who I've stayed in touch with for, now approaching 30 years. That is the kind of experience that this could possibly have with you. So, and I talked to folks who've done other years in the Alliance program, and some of them have very similar experiences. Now, the other thing for me as a person who was going to a commuter school, it was also pivotal because it got me a chance to be in residence on a campus, right? So there I got a chance to see something else, something very different. And so when I'm promoting the Alliance to my students, the thing that I always tell them is that it's an opportunity to learn about another campus environment, meet some new professors, meet staff members in different places, because your experience at your undergraduate institution is one experience. And so if you can have experiences elsewhere before going to graduate school, those could really be those are really important, and those could really be like so influential. You may very well just learn that you don't like the layout of a university, right? That may end up being the reason why you decide to take it off your list. Maybe it gets too hot in there over the summer. Maybe it ends up being a lot more sort of attractive than you imagine. So there are all these things that you cannot really get without sort of being either on in sort of in residence and or really being immersed in that particular environment. So right. The other thing is what it really allowed me to do was get a head start on my senior year. So
Mm.
I spent a summer, although my school didn't require a senior thesis, I spent a summer kind of writing what ended up being my graduate school writing sample. I spent a summer really thinking through about the different types of graduate schools that graduate programs and schools that I wanted to apply to. I spent a summer getting a sense of like, what are graduate schools looking for, right? I got a chance to spend a summer meeting new faculty members at a different institution and building up a network that even though I didn't end up at NYU, there are several faculty members who I met with that summer that I stayed in touch with and I still am in touch with, for years afterward, right? Who were helpful when I was a graduate student, who, when I moved back to New York to work at Eugene Lang, who were sometimes helpful in that capacity, who allow me to join their writing groups or research groups. So there are different ways that that experience could, sort of become beneficial. And at the core, like the most important or kind of pivotal aspect of it was I was surrounded by a group of other students who were motivated for the same thing, right? To looking to possibly pursue a PhD. And so we weren't competing with one another, right? We weren't, it's not as if we were all applying to the same program by any stretch of the imagination. So we got a chance to kind of really push one another. So we read each other's writing. So I got a chance to like, you know, share my work with other folks, get feedback from get feedback from colleagues in other disciplines, hear what they were thinking about, what they were learning, at their different campuses. So that, like, just being in community with other like-minded, very motivated students for, that part of the summer was just powerful in of itself.
Wow, it sounds like it was an incredibly transformative experience. I myself, I did undergrad research, but I never had that like summer program experience. And I just see how so many people have come out of it with these long-lasting personal relationships, exposure to things that you may not have been exposed to had you not participated. So that's wonderful to hear. And for students who are participating in the summer research program this summer or will be in the future, what are some of the most important or significant things that you recommend they do with their time in a summer research program? Like, what would be the most helpful in terms of um, progressing on to grad school and a career in research?
Oh, great. A couple of things. One, once you know at which institution you're going to be for the summer, do your research, right? Find
Mm.
out who are some of the faculty members who are there. While not many of them are unlikely to be around all summer, I'm talking about beyond whoever is your mentor for the program. Um, there will be some who are in town or coming in and out of town who may be sort of open to having coffee with you if you reach out, let them know that you're doing this program. There, you sort of already identified yourself as an emerging scholar. You're part of a program that their institution sort of validating. And if you've done some research about them and the kind of institution, I think they'd be oftentimes it would be open for a conversation and or at least, an email exchange. If they can't meet in person to do coffee or lunch, they might be able to do a Zoom. The kind of research that you do before you head to the program can really help shape your experience. And so this also gets into the kind of the networking part, right? So I've talked a little bit about mentorship, which is going to be a consistent part of your career in higher ed, but also doing research and kind of doing both mentoring in very deliberate and kind of clear ways where it's reciprocal, right? You're not just showing up cold and saying, "Hey, please tell me about yourself," tenured professor. Coming in to say, "Oh, I read your profile. I went and looked at this article. I was really fascinated. I don't know if you're still doing this research. It really speaks to my interest. I just really think that it is important, really important work. I appreciate that." The other thing is set some goals for yourself, right? Your goal for the summer cannot be to write your thesis, right? So yeah, most your university is not anticipating that you're going to spend the summer beforehand. Your goal for the summer cannot be that, you're going to, if you're going to take the GRE, that you're going to spend, if you're doing a summer research program, that you're going to spend 12 hours a day, doing GRE prep. Think about like sort of what are the goals of the program? What did you sign up for? And make it, sort of commit yourself to being part of that process. And then add in some kind of small, measurable, achievable goals that you can do, right? So maybe there's an opportunity to fine tune and annotate a bibliography. Maybe there's an opportunity to turn a paper that you had written in the sophomore year, or ideally, if you're doing this program as a junior, sort of as a rising senior, sometime in junior year, that you could possibly use as a writing sample. It may not be a writing sample for graduate school if you're maybe a rising junior, but maybe it could be a writing sample for a research fellowship or a summer opportunity at your or post-grad opportunity of a different kind at through your home university, right? And I refer back, and I know sort of in the STEM disciplines, it's not likely to be the same, where like the focus isn't going to be on a writing sample. And in those disciplines, right, think about sort of what you can get out of this lab experience or this summer research experience that's clear. Maybe an introduction to a new coding software. Maybe it is something that's very technical. Maybe what you will end up learning is that there's an area of research that is ultimately not the kind of thing that you want to do. So maybe you're trying to decide between biochem or biomechanical engineering. So maybe this is what, that summer helps you define that, right? So that lab experience may give you a chance to say, you know what, I tried this over the summer. I am really, happy that I am having these lab experiences at my university because they are very much closer to what I want. So things that are kind of oftentimes I say small in terms of and by that I mean measurable that you can achieve, right? So that you're not setting yourself up for, when August and definitely when September arrives, feeling as if like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I did this summer. I don't really know what I got out of this program. And these goals are definitely great conversation starters to have with your mentor, both at your home institution and at your summer institution. You can go in and say, "Look, I'm really looking forward to this summer, and I'm really working with you. I would like to think about what I might be able to sort of really see at the end of summer as a measurable, right?"
Mhm.
Um, and and that helps frame the conversation. It also helps really frame the kind of feedback that they know to give you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like, going into the experience, having done your homework, being intentional about, what you want to do while you're in your program are two key factors to really help that program be a transformative experience in terms of your career journey. So, and research journey. And speaking of, so did your experience in Leadership Alliance summer research program influence the research topics that you went on to later study? Were they connected?
Um, In some ways, yes. So I would say that the experience helped really help scaffold my transition to graduate school. I think that would be the best way of framing it.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, and I think it's in some ways sort of seeing the kind of the work that my current students are doing. I think some of the approaches are very different, right? But what I got out of the experience was that I should say one of the more important lessons that I got out of the experience was that my research was going to need to expand when I became a graduate student,
Mhm.
right? that some of the questions and that the things that I was interested in as an undergraduate were good starting points there. And in many ways, I was maybe more advanced than some of my peers in terms of like, because I'd spent some time and had opportunities to think through these things, but they were not necessarily the kinds of research questions or at the depths that I was going to need. And so going into graduate school, knowing that I needed to expand my horizons and being open, ended up being more open to different ideas really was pivotal. So to kind of put that in perspective, I thought coming out of the going into the alliance and coming out that my clear-cut interest was in 19th century narratives of captivity, right? So, or formerly called the slave narratives. I'd written a couple of papers about it in some of my literature about Frederick Douglass in particular. And I was looking forward to doing some research and some other writers, of course, Harry Jacobs, and I was learning about Martin Delany, for example. So there were other, so there are these literary figures that I was learning about in the 19th century that I was like, okay, I am going to build on this, right? My writing sample was one of my Frederick Douglass papers, and for my graduate program, and then so I was like I am going to build off of that. But what I realized though, as I was building on this, that there were and this came up in the alliance, right? I spent some time talking to law professors, right? So then I really became interested in terms of like sort of what were some of the sort of legal components that sort of underwritten slavery that also sort of show up in the literature. I spent some time talking to linguists, psychologists, sociology professors who were thinking about sort of the experience of slavery in very different ways, right? And so by the time that I kind of was branching out as a graduate student, I had some other areas, so, other disciplines to start tapping into. And then I realized, like, maybe what the question I was interested in was not really about slavery, but it was about freedom. And fortunately, I'd also already started tapping in on these, through these other disciplines, expanding the horizon so that I was not solely looking at sort of writers and figures just in the continental US. And that opened it up for me to have a much broader kind of dissertation topic. And also during my experience in graduate school, really allowed me to lean into classes and kind of coursework that may not have initially been tied to my research focus. If you'd asked me going into like sort of at the end of my junior year, right before I did the Alliance, I would have thought that the best thing about graduate school was that I was going to take like all these classes that were solely just going to be about 19th century African American literature, maybe, sort of 19th and 20th, and that was it, right? So I was like, that was going to be what was going to make graduate school was amazing. No, actually, what ended up making graduate school amazing was the opportunity to branch out and then see how those ideas or sort of those learning about these other areas of inquiry improved my work as a scholar, and gave me more breadth in terms of the kinds of classes that I could teach, so that when I did eventually go out into the job market, I was able to sort of apply for different kind of jobs because I'd had different kinds of teaching experience, different kinds of research experience. So those are the things. So was it helpful? Yes. But it was helpful in the sense that I learned that going into graduate school, I would need to expand the kinds of questions I was asking and sort of the breadth of my research, and I leaned into that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. In some ways, I think that could be a little intimidating, but it really kind of helped you to steer, you knew what you needed to do when you got there, pretty much.
Hmm.
So that's great. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm really curious about what you're currently doing in your position as an Associate Dean of Students at Yale College.
I'm doing, the way that I tend to describe my work is that my fingerprints are on a lot of different things.
Mhm.
So at the core, a lot of my work is around student support and helping students um, um, uh, sort of access the resources and supports needed to thrive at the institution. So whether that is connecting to our colleagues in our advising and sort of academic support centers, our colleagues in financial aid to kind of work on or address issues as their circumstances have changed, our colleagues in mental health and counseling and sort of our well-being services, right? If students are encountering any kind of health emergencies or acuity, and then sometimes maybe even just resources on campus, sort of off campus, right? So your lives and sort of lived experience as a college student, the lived experiences of a college student are so varied that the things that they sometimes need or sort of are most urgent could look very different from student to student at any given point. So a good chunk of my role is helping students connect to those things when they need to and try to do it with as little friction as possible.
Right.
The other thing that I do is I still, working with the Mellon Mays and Edward A. Bouchet program. I do a good chunk of work helping sort of animate students' interest in graduate school and the Ph.D. in particular. So whether it's bringing back recent alums, scholars who are sort of at the midpoint or maybe even some cases later on in their career to talk about their experiences as graduate students, sort of the transition between undergrad to graduate school, and then becoming a professional. I also bring in kind of alums who are in gap years. So whether that gap year has been 1 or 2 years, or maybe it's a perpetual gap year, but they're all working as an independent researcher or other ways that they are putting their research skills to work. I'm helping students connect and sort of learn more about that as well. We also have a residential college system at Yale. So there are 14 residential colleges. Each residential college has a dean, a residential college dean, who serves as a chief academic advisor. And so part of my work is also helping the deans execute some of their roles mostly in the student support lane, so student support lane, but in times in other areas as well, in terms of whether student development or and again this access to resources point. So that is, I think, sort of kind of broadly speaking, sort of what I do.
Yeah, thank you for explaining. And it sounds almost like, mentorship is built into your position and not only for students, but for your colleagues. And being that like that thread that connects different students with the different things they need. And that must be a very interesting role to be in.
No, absolutely. If anyone knows me sort of on a kind of a personal level, the thing that I really enjoy doing is connecting people, right? And so I'm the friend that says, "Oh, have you ever met such and so? Have you ever, considered this?" And so I bring a lot of that energy to really to my work with students. And I think it's not, part of it is what I'm doing ultimately is the thing that I just do in my own life is like, hey, I think I know someone who might be able to help you with that.
Mhm.
And when I think back to it, kind of what really was it, again, going back to this kind of the various points of different kinds of networking and advising and sort of relationships that one can have in higher ed as both as a student, particularly as a student, thinking from the perspective of students, like we all benefited from that faculty member or that staff member who says, you know what, I think you should talk to such and such, right? And those of us who follow up on that I think tend to benefit the most. And so I like to do that as well because it was so helpful to me in my career.
So, how did you decide to make or to make the switch or to get into the administrative side of higher ed? I know you did teaching, and you still probably do some teaching, but I know there are several students who are, trying to decide which way they want their career to go, be it teaching, research, or administration. So what were some of the um, significant, I guess, things that helped you to decide to go into administration?
It's quite a, that's it's a great question. It's a one that I really enjoy, really thinking through because it's always an evolving one.
Mhm.
The thing that I really come back to often is my own experiences as an undergraduate and as a student. The things that were really the most kind of pivotal for me were those moments when I was in Dr. Bob's office in her office hours, or I was meeting with another staff member. I learned so much, right? I learned a lot in the classroom, and I really sort of had great instructors, but I learned so much from those kinds of office hours conversations. And what I realized, like a lot of times, as I sort of my career started taking off, the thing that sort of drew me to a career in higher ed to really allowed me to sort of um, be convicted in making that pivot from pursuing a journalism career or a creative writing career was those kinds of mentoring conversations, those kinds of office hours conversations. And that's what I just wanted to do. Like that is what I really enjoyed doing. And so I started fairly early on in my career, kind of massaging the kinds of professional opportunities that I took in toward that route. The other thing, like I've also had, some other, experiences. I taught high school history for about 3 years because I wanted to become a better teacher.
Mhm.
And, one of the things, ironically, about that experience working in a high school is that you have to spend like part of your time, part of your time is spent in these kinds of advisor roles. So I had a homeroom and, we had our weekly advisories. I had, sort of small group kind of advising groups as well. And so there were all these like supplemental opportunities to work with students either one-on-one or in small groups. We had to, many of us had coaching or sort of other kind of club related opportunities. And I was like, here I am again. Like I'm enjoying my time in classroom. I'm again learning how to be a much better instructor. But lo and behold, sort of what am I kind of spending my time on? What is kind of really like sort of where is my energy driven? It's kind of again on these kinds of office hours, sort of co-curricular research and kind of personal and scholastic development opportunities. And then it also goes back to the alliance, right? So um, the thing that's about it is that I wasn't in a class, right? And so all of those opportunities that I had in the alliance was people who took part, who took time away from their summers to pour into us, right? And so I was like, I've had all these great experiences where people made time to kind of help make a way for me and sort of help steer me. And that is like that ended up just being something that I was always felt energizing and something that I always like really stood out to me. So the other aspect of it, in addition to like sort of on these kind of personal levels, um, there's still an opportunity to do like a lot of research. So I just learn about different things. I research about different things, right? So instead of researching, 20th century African American history, I'm researching trends in student development. I'm researching trends in kind of student leadership development. I'm researching trends in terms of like around adolescence, in terms of mental health. So there are all these things that I'm learning about that 20, 50, 15 years ago were not necessarily kind of my on my research portfolio. And so I am again really energized by the opportunity to continue learning and putting into practice in very immediate ways what I'm learning as well.
I can totally relate to both of those things, having transitioned from, a researcher at the bench, into more, STEM education and how to help students learn, biology. I was blown away when I learned that there was this whole like literature and primary literature about just that. Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, you're right. It's even though, I may not be at the bench anymore, I'm still always delving into the literature to learn more about how I can assist students with learning and their professional development now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you work a lot with students and in particular students in these fellowships. So we got several questions about what fellowships opportunities, what grad schools, what are they looking for in their applicants? Like what are some kinds of extra things that you see quite frequently or that make students stand out?
One thing I would definitely want to point out is that graduate schools are not looking at your extracurriculars in the sense of like clubs and organizations, right? Unless that you're able to make a clear connection between an activity or project or program that you did as part of that organization.
Mhm.
So if part of your work for your organization is maybe um, if you're a historian and maybe you did an oral history or you're part of an oral history project for your organization, that I could see something being part of your CV that you talk about and maybe even talk about in your personal statement in graduate school, right? As a way of expanding the way that you're interested in history. If you are, interested in the social sciences, economics, for example, or maybe even sociology, and you've done work, and I'm just thinking about like student orgs, right now for a moment, that maybe you did something where it was really in terms of like organizational development. If you did something really kind of, important in terms of the finances or sort of really helping get your organization to a different level. Maybe that's something you talk about, but I wouldn't necessarily think about sort of extracurriculars in terms of clubs unless they were tied to and more directly tied to your research interests. Now, what they are, sort of the kinds of co-curricular opportunities or experiences that they're looking for is something that shows that, things that show that you have a committed interest in research, pursuing a PhD, and that you are, if admitted, really are likely to complete the degree. Those are things that they're, things that show that you finish what you start, right?
Mm.
The research aspect of it, there are a couple of different layers. I'll start with a layer that students don't often think about, is there are students who write off the experience of not getting a particular fellowship or a particular opportunity. They're like, oh, I didn't get it, so it didn't mean anything. No, actually it can, right? If you were a finalist for something, that is usually worth noting, right? Because again, it shows that you got to this other level, right? So maybe you got to the interview round or a finalist round. There is an opportunity to show that if you are consistently applying to things, it shows that there's a demonstrated interest there, right? So maybe that's a conversation you have with uh, your recommenders, and you could say, I know that if you look at my CV, it says that I got these 2 or 3 fellowships, but I want you to know that, here are all these other things that I applied for as opportunities to do this work. That way, they're able, your recommenders are able to show, and in some ways, you will also be able to say, since my sophomore year, I've been consistently applying and looking for opportunities to do X, Y, Z. Now, the very tangible things, right? If you are in a STEM field, lab and research opportunities, right? Thinking about look to see what the benchmarks are at your institution, and then also sort of things that go above. So if your institution very much promotes summer research opportunities for its students, have you tapped into that, right? Um, and have you talked to your advisors at your campus to make sure that you're tapping into that resource, right? Because one of the, professors in graduate schools, they have a sense of what many schools are doing for their undergraduates, right? So to be able to show that like you sort of tapped into, then also, of course, become knowledgeable about summer research opportunity programs, right? Not just at your institution, at other institutions, right? So you can Google these, sort of just do summer. You can do SR-OP, and you'll find listings. You can, the Alliance, other institutions have lists of like some supplementals. Your whoever is in your career center, your fellowships office, they all have this information on hand that you can access so that you can apply for these and ideally take advantage. So that is whether you are STEM, humanities, or social sciences. Those are the kinds of things. So those tangible research experiences. Now, once you've maybe applied to a broader program or two, you've got a chance to have two or three, maybe one or two of these opportunities as your undergraduate. Try to start identifying mentors and people, sort of faculty members on your campus who can provide you with supplemental research experience, right? So maybe it is as a research assistant on a book project or a longer range kind of social science project that they may be working on. Of course, if you're in a lab experience, maybe if you're even if you're in a lab experience, does your school allow for independent studies, for example? Is there an opportunity to do an independent study with either your PI or maybe even one of the postdocs so that you're able to do a deeper dive into the literature of a particular literature on of a topic that is maybe related to your sort of the work in your lab, or something that you're hoping to develop on your own. So those are the kinds of things, right? So one is in extracurriculars, we're not talking about student organizations unless it's really tied to your research. Two, what offerings are there at your university, and are you taking school or college or university, and are you taking advantage of them? Three, summer research opportunity programs. Apply, 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 and do one. Or look at, develop a research mentoring relationship with someone on your campus. So whether it's serving as a research assistant or doing possibly an independent study around a topic that is of mutual interest for you both.
Great, thank you. Uh, so what advice would you give students who are interested in pursuing a PhD, but they're trying to figure out if that's the right pathway for them? And then along those lines, what advice do you give students in terms of deciding which graduate program to go to or to choose from if they have multiple offers?
Right. So if you're interested in a PhD, think about the PhD as a degree that offers you an opportunity to do any number of different things, right? As you all are probably hearing and have, and this goes back to my generation where we learned or heard a lot about the job market once you get the PhD. And it's true, right? Sort of there are only so many jobs available as professors, right? But being a sort of having a PhD, if you're really interested in maybe student affairs, academic affairs, sort of administrative work, it can lend itself to that as well. Curatorial work in museums, research institutes, archives, it can lend itself as that. Lab directors, research directors in sort of STEM fields, working in industry in STEM fields, it can lend itself to that, right? So there are any number of different things that you can do with a PhD. It's a terminal degree. It is one where, in the process of obtaining it, you can develop a lot of different skills. One of which, or the sort of the one that is most prominently referenced, is becoming a college professor or becoming a academic researcher in at a college or university. But that is not the only thing. When I taught at the high school, there were several other teachers who had PhDs, right? So our math department, our English department, and what drew them to those roles was that they got a chance to talk about literature um, and teach it because that was one of that is what they weren't necessarily interested in publishing per se, but they were interested in teaching and talking about literature with young people, right? And so there are any number of different things that you can do with a PhD that does not end up as a college professor or academic researcher at, in higher ed. So think about that. And are you open to the broad range of career and professional and life opportunities? The other thing in terms of choosing an institution, um, be more expansive in your I be more expansive or sort of open than you think you are, right? So I've worked at different universities or different colleges and universities, right? So when I worked at schools that sort of are built as more selective, the students at those schools tend to think that the only kinds of graduate often are sort of primed to thinking about the graduate and kind of professional schools that they apply to have to be the most selective ones, right? So then all of a sudden you only have like those schools, sort of the Stanfords and Harvards and Browns of the world only have so many slots in there, but they're really competitive, really great research institutions throughout the country. And I know there's some West folks and some folks in the Southeast who will really enjoy hearing this, but you can find a great research university in Tennessee, in Louisiana, in Florida, and definitely in California. There are no, shortage of them. There are great scholars in, Arizona. So there are people sort of who you're reading their books and you do their deep dives who are at schools in other parts of the country. Be open to possibly going to these places. I have faculty members who reach out from time to time and they'll say, look, I know it's a long shot that we'll get an applicant from Yale, but I want to let you know about our program. And there are other times when I've been at other universities where I was not getting those, and that wasn't the sort of the framing of the email, right? And so please, if you are interested in applying to graduate school, be more open than you already are, right, in terms of the schools that you're considering applying to, because you can very well have a really great research experience, find great levels of support, and really set yourself up for success in your career.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. Just to think a little bit more broadly. I myself got pretty focused on, geographic location and looking back, I wish that wasn't like one of the main drivers that, looking at the faculty who are in the department, well, cost of living, I guess that has that was
Yep.
also a factor in terms of geography, but
Hmm.
yeah. Great. So we're coming to the end of our time, and I know there were some questions submitted live, but maybe you'd be willing to let me share your LinkedIn profile in our Google Classroom for students who want to follow up with you. But I wanted to end on this question that was submitted ahead of time. So, as a former SR-EIP participant who later became a faculty member and a leader of these fellowship programs, what advice would you give to students from underrepresented backgrounds who are interested in pursuing research-intensive careers but may struggle to see themselves in those spaces or to navigate that hidden curriculum of academia?
Um, have confidence in that you're not the first person to ask that question, and have confidence in that since you're not the first person to ask that question, that there's an opportunity to build on the work or sort of the progress that's been made by those who've asked that question and sort of who's faced those obstacles before, right? It's a really kind of my attempt at being very poetic and saying that you're not alone in this, right? Um, this is goes back to the homework part in terms of doing your, when you're looking into programs. Uh, if you look at the biographies of some professors, you'll be surprised that not every professor, especially at the Ivies, went to Ivy as an undergraduate, right? So look at that. That should tell you that, these schools sort of reach out or sort of cast a net very widely. And then, if you continue looking further, right, you'll see that, people are coming from or having all kinds of different experiences in graduate school, right? So they're going to different universities, they're different types of graduate programs all over the country. And so there are opportunities to learn and sort of really set your own set your own pace and set your own path, right? The other thing in this is that programs that, being part of this conversation, you're already taking a step to being part of a broader network and a community. Going back to what I said at the outset, the folks who I did the lines with, there's several of them who now, almost 30 years later, I was at my godson's high school graduation just last weekend, right? So this is the kind of experience, this is the kind of opportunity that you're getting. Lean into this, right? So reach out to, stay in touch, follow up, read your emails, read your emails. These programs not only are just kind of take in, but these programs also do a lot of outreach, right? So I still, read my alliance emails. I, look out when I see an email that comes directly from Jane or Maria or John, because I know it's an opportunity to engage. I fill out surveys, because what you're doing is giving them, these programs, an opportunity to think about ways to continue serving you and helping you develop. Because the questions that you're asking now as a sophomore or junior, or maybe even a senior, are very different, the kinds of questions and the kinds of support that you might need. So you're likely will find kind of peers, right, at each stage. But then how do you expand and kind of really get the broader institutional support? And that is leaning back to some of the things that you did, reaching out, respond to emails, apply for things. So one, I guess, is sort of to kind of bring it back, the community is there, lean into being part of it and doing your part to kind of build and continue nurturing those communities.
I love that advice. Well, thank you so much, friends, for joining us this afternoon. And as I said, if it's okay with you, I'll share your LinkedIn profile in our Google Classroom so students can connect with you. And we're just so grateful and appreciative that you're able to give your time and advice this afternoon. And
Yes. And
for our,
if you're reaching out, and if
yeah,
you're reaching out to me from via LinkedIn, definitely say that, you attended this workshop or you learned of this so that I have a frame in terms of, being able to respond. That's another thing when you're reaching out to folks in networking, give some context. I saw some fellow St. Brusians, some South Side Jamaica Queens. So, feel free to put that in your email as well.
Thank you so much. And to our students, if you're not already following us on social media, please do. We are on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and it's a great way to learn about different opportunities that are available through our community. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.